The morning sun barely pierced through the thick, gray clouds hanging over Northern California's rolling hills. Fire Captain Ana Rodriguez stood at the station's observation deck, her experienced eyes scanning the horizon. 20 years of firefighting had taught her to read the signs, and everything she saw spelled trouble. The air felt different that day. It was thick and heavy, like a wool blanket wrapped around the shoulders of the hills. The wind carried the scent of dry pine needles and sun-baked earth, reminding Anna of the severe drought that had turned the once green landscape into a tinderbox. She took a sip from her coffee mug, still warm from the morning brew, while checking the weather readings on her tablet. "Chief's not going to like these numbers," she muttered to herself, looking at the dangerously high temperature predictions. The forecast showed triple-digit heat, with humidity dropping below 15%. Even worse, strong winds were expected to pick up by afternoon, the perfect recipe for what firefighters dreaded most. Inside the fire station, the morning shift was already buzzing with activity. The crew moved with purpose, checking equipment and running through their daily procedures. But there was an underlying tension in the air, the kind that came from years of experience and gut feelings that something big was brewing. "Hey Cap," called out firefighter Tommy Chen from the engine bay. He was doing his routine check of the fire trucks, making sure every piece of equipment was in its place. "Weather system's looking nasty. My grandma used to say when the clouds look like that, it means nature's cooking up something fierce." Anna nodded, walking over to help him inspect the hoses. "Your grandma might be onto something, Tommy. I've seen conditions like this before, back in 2018. That fire moved so fast it caught everyone off guard." She paused, remembering those difficult days. "Let's make sure we're ready for anything." The radio crackled to life with updates from neighboring stations. Reports were coming in about multiple small fires already being tackled in the region. The drought had turned even the smallest spark into a potential disaster. Anna's team had already responded to 3 brush fires this week alone, each one more aggressive than the last. During the morning briefing, Anna spread out a large map across the meeting room table. Red markers dotted the areas where fires had recently burned, while yellow pins showed the most vulnerable zones. Her finger traced the line of the nearby communities, many of them tucked into the wilderness they called home. "Listen up, everyone," she addressed her team, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "We're looking at dangerous conditions today. The hills haven't seen rain in months, and these winds." She pointed to the weather data projected on the wall. "They're expected to hit 40 miles per hour by sunset. I want everyone on high alert." The crew listened intently, each member understanding the gravity of the situation. They'd all seen how quickly things could go wrong in conditions like these. Rookie firefighter David Patel raised his hand, his fresh out-of-training eagerness tempered by the serious atmosphere. "Captain, what about the Pine Ridge community? They've only got one road in and out," he pointed out, showing a keen eye for potential trouble spots. Anna nodded approvingly. "Good thinking, David. I've already talked to the station chief about setting up a pre-evacuation alert system. We can't wait until the last minute with these conditions." As the morning progressed, the station received more calls about smoke sightings. Each report made Anna's stomach tighten a little more. She'd seen too many beautiful California summers turn into nightmares of ash and flame. The memories of past fires, of families losing everything, of close calls and desperate rescues weighed heavily on her mind. By early afternoon, the wind had picked up just as predicted. Dust devils danced across the parched fields, and the few clouds that remained raced across the sky like they were running from something. The station's weather instruments showed the humidity dropping steadily, while the temperature climbed past 100 degrees. Anna stood in front of the station, watching a massive cloud formation building in the distance. The air felt electric, charged with the kind of energy that preceded major storms. Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the hills, too far to hear the thunder, but close enough to make her worry. "Cap, you might want to see this," called out Lisa Ramirez, the station's communications officer. She held up a satellite image showing a dangerous weather system moving into the area. National Weather Service just issued a red flag warning. They're saying these could be the worst fire conditions we've seen in decades. Anna took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She thought about all the homes scattered through the hills, the families who trusted firefighters to keep them safe, the elderly residents who might need extra help evacuating. Every decision she would make in the coming hours could mean the difference between life and death. Back in her office, she began updating emergency protocols and evacuation routes. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from other fire stations, all preparing for what felt like an inevitable disaster. She pulled out a worn photograph from her desk drawer, a picture of her own family standing in front of their home in the hills. It reminded her of why she chose this job, why every firefighter on her team put their lives on the line. The station's alarm system suddenly blared to life, making everyone jump. A new fire had been spotted, and from the initial reports, it was growing fast. Anna grabbed her gear, her movements automatic after years of practice. As she headed for the engine bay, she could see the first hints of smoke on the horizon. "This is it, people," she called out to her team as they rushed to their positions. "Remember your training, watch each other's backs, and let's show this fire what we're made of." The engines roared to life, sirens wailing as they pulled out of the station. Anna looked at the determined faces of her crew, each one ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The gathering storm that had been brewing all day was about to break, and they would be the first line of defense between nature's fury and the communities they had sworn to protect. The stillness of night was shattered by the piercing sound of the station alarm. Captain Ana Rodriguez jolted awake in her small office where she'd been catching a quick nap between shifts. The digital clock on her desk flashed 3:47 a.m. She was on her feet before the dispatch message finished coming through, years of training kicking in automatically. Lightning strike reported near Pine Ridge, multiple witnesses confirmed ground fire, the dispatcher's voice crackled through the station's speakers. Immediate response required. Wind conditions deteriorating. The night shift crew was already moving, their shadows dancing across the station walls as they rushed to gear up. Anna could hear boots hitting the floor and equipment being checked. The practiced chaos of an emergency response filled the station with purposeful energy. "Time to roll," shouted Tommy Chen, already dressed in his turnout gear. He helped rookie David Patel adjust his oxygen tank straps as they moved toward the engines. The younger firefighter's hands were steady, but Anna could see the nervous energy in his movements. This would be his first major fire response. The night air hit them like a furnace blast as they stepped outside. Anna's skin prickled with unease. The temperature shouldn't be this high at this hour. The wind whipped around them, carrying the first hints of smoke. In the distance, an orange glow pulsed against the dark sky like a living thing breathing in the night. "Engine 47, respond code 3, Anna commanded as she climbed into the captain's seat. The sirens wailed to life, cutting through the darkness. Behind them, 2 more engines followed, their emergency lights painting the trees in flashes of red and white. The convoy thundered down the empty streets, each crew member mentally preparing for what lay ahead. Through her headset, Anna listened to the stream of updates. The fire had started high in the hills, where a dry lightning storm had swept through earlier in the night. The initial reports were growing more concerning by the minute. 3 separate strike points had been identified, and the high winds were pushing them together. "Look at that cap," Lisa Ramirez called from the back of the engine, pointing through the windshield. The glow they'd seen from the station had doubled in size during their short drive. Fingers of flame reached into the sky, visible now through the gaps in the hills. The smoke column was building, taking on the distinctive mushroom shape that experienced firefighters dreaded. As they rounded the final bend in the road, the full scale of what they faced became clear. The fire had already consumed several acres of bone-dry vegetation. It moved like a living creature, sending embers flying ahead of the main blaze, starting new spot fires wherever they landed. The wind, now gusting over 30 miles per hour, drove the flames forward with frightening speed. "Command, Engine 47 on scene," Anna reported, her voice calm despite the chaos before them. Fire showing approximately 20 acres, moving northeast. Multiple spot fires developing. Requesting additional resources and air support at earliest possible light. The crew jumped into action, unrolling hoses and setting up defensive positions. Anna surveyed the terrain, her mind racing through years of experience and training. The fire was behaving erratically, defying the usual patterns. The drought-stricken landscape offered no natural barriers to slow its advance. "Tommy, take the left flank," she ordered, pointing to where the flames were trying to climb a ridge. "David, you're with him. Lisa, get those ground lines set up. We need to cut it off before it crests that hill." The firefighters moved with practiced precision, but Anna could see they were fighting an uphill battle. The wind kept shifting, making it impossible to predict where the fire would move next. Embers rained down around them, forcing them to constantly check for new ignition points. 2 hours into the fight, the situation had only grown worse. The fire had jumped their first containment line like it wasn't even there. The smoke was so thick now that they had to rely on thermal imaging cameras to see more than a few feet ahead. The radio crackled constantly with reports of new spot fires and requests for support. "Command to all units," the chief's voice came through, tension evident even through the static. "Fire has grown to approximately 200 acres. Wind speeds increasing. This is now a Type 1 incident. All crews prepare for structure protection assignments." Anna's heart sank as she processed those words. Type 1 meant this fire was beyond their local resources to control. It would require a full incident management team and resources from across the state. But help would take hours to arrive, and the fire wasn't waiting. The morning sun, when it finally rose, was just a dim red ball behind the smoke. Anna gathered her crew for a quick briefing, their faces streaked with soot and exhaustion. They'd been fighting nonstop, but the fire seemed to be growing stronger with each passing hour. "Listen up," she said, her voice hoarse from the smoke. "This thing's moving faster than anything we've seen before. We've got subdivisions in its path, and evacuation orders are going out now. We're switching to structure protection. Our priority is saving lives." As if to emphasize her words, a massive pine tree suddenly burst into flames nearby, the heat so intense they could feel it through their protective gear. The fire had created its own weather system now, with swirling winds and fire whirls dancing across the landscape. "Cap," David called out urgently. "The radio, they're saying Pine Ridge is in immediate danger. The fire spotted ahead of the main front." Anna looked at her crew, seeing the determination in their tired eyes. They all knew what was at stake. Somewhere ahead of them, families were waking up to the worst morning of their lives. The real test was just beginning. "Mount up," she ordered, already moving toward the engine. "We've got people counting on us. This fire wants a fight. Well, it's got one." As they drove toward the threatened community, Anna sent up a silent prayer. The morning sun continued to rise behind them, painting the smoke clouds in shades of blood red and orange. The day was just beginning, but she knew it would be one that none of them would ever forget. The smell of smoke crept into 8-year-old Amy's dreams before the actual danger woke her. She sat up in bed, clutching her stuffed giraffe, confused by the strange orange light flickering through her window. The night didn't feel right. It was too warm, too bright, and the air in her room felt thick and heavy. "Mommy," she called out, her voice small in the eerie silence. The answer came quickly, too quickly, as her mother rushed into the room, still wearing her gardening clothes from earlier that evening. "Come on, sweetie, we need to get up now," Mrs. Chen said, trying to keep her voice steady as she grabbed a backpack from Amy's closet. Her hands shook slightly as she stuffed it with clothes. "Remember how we practiced our emergency plan? This is just like that." Down the hall, Mr. Chen was already waking up the twins, Michael and Robert. At 13, they were old enough to understand the gravity of the situation. The boys had spent their entire lives in this house nestled against the wilderness, and they'd grown up with the annual fire safety drills their parents insisted on. "Dad, the internet's down," Michael reported, phone in hand as he threw essential items into his backpack. "I can't check the evacuation routes." "It's okay, we know the way," Mr. Chen assured him, but his eyes told a different story as he glanced out the window. The familiar view of their backyard had transformed into something alien and threatening. The sky glowed an angry red, and ash fell like dark snow against the window panes. Mrs. Chen hurried through the house, gathering important documents, medications, and photo albums. Her hands lingered for a moment on the family portrait taken just last month, all of them smiling on their back deck, the hills green and peaceful behind them, the same hills that were now ablaze. The emergency radio, Mr. Chen remembered suddenly, rushing to the kitchen drawer where they kept it. The device crackled to life, filling the room with urgent voices reporting road closures and evacuation orders. The family huddled around it, their faces illuminated by the growing glow from outside. Pine Ridge residents in Zones 3 and 4, immediate evacuation required. Fire has jumped containment lines. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The Chens lived in Zone 3. They had maybe 30 minutes before the fire reached them, according to the radio. Mr. Chen grabbed the emergency bags they'd prepared years ago but hoped they'd never need, while Mrs. Chen helped Emmy into her shoes. "Mom, look," Robert called from the living room window. A pair of deer bounded past their house, followed by several rabbits. The animals knew something terrible was coming, and they were running for their lives. The family piled into their SUV, Mr. Chen behind the wheel. The garage door opened to reveal a world transformed by smoke and fear. Their usual escape route led down the mountain toward the main highway, a road they'd driven hundreds of times. But tonight was different. They made it half a mile before they saw it, a massive tree, its trunk thick as a car, blazing like a torch across the road. Behind it, more flames danced through the forest, creating a wall of fire that blocked their path completely. "Turn around," Mrs. Chen cried, clutching Emmy close as the heat penetrated even through the car's windows. Mr. Chen threw the car into reverse, but they'd only gone a few yards when another cracking sound split the air. A second burning tree crashed down behind them, and with it fell their last escape route. Emmy began to cry softly, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. The twins sat silent, their faces pale in the orange light. Through the smoke, they could see other cars turning around, headlights cutting through the darkness as their neighbors searched for alternative routes that didn't exist. "The Creek Road," Michael suggested suddenly, remembering the old service road that ran past the water treatment plant. "Maybe we could." But Mr. Chen was already shaking his head. "Too dangerous. That road's barely wide enough for one car, and it'll be worse in the dark with the smoke." He pulled out his phone, still no signal. The power lines must have gone down, taking cell service with them. They returned to their house. The only place they knew was still safe for now. The air grew thicker with each passing minute, and the roar of the approaching fire sounded like a freight train bearing down on them. Mrs. Chen wet some towels and stuffed them under the doors, while Mr. Chen turned on all the exterior sprinklers, a last-ditch effort to protect their home. "What about the basement?" Robert asked, his voice steady despite his fear. Mrs. Garcia from school said her uncle survived a fire in his basement. "No, honey," Mrs. Chen explained gently. "We could get trapped down there. We need to stay where firefighters can find us." She tried to sound confident, but her eyes kept darting to the windows, watching the flames draw closer. The emergency radio continued its broadcast, now reporting multiple homes lost in their area. The fire had grown beyond anyone's expectations, driven by winds that seemed to come from all directions at once. The Chens could hear propane tanks exploding in the distance, each boom making Emmy jump and clutch her giraffe tighter. Mr. Chen stood at the kitchen window, his arm around his wife, watching their dreams literally go up in flames. They'd built this house 15 years ago, planning every detail, planting each tree in their garden. Now all they could do was pray someone would find them before it was too late. "Look," Michael suddenly shouted, pointing through the smoke. "There's lights coming up the road." Through the thickening smoke, they could see the flashing red and white lights of a fire engine. The massive vehicle was pushing through debris, its water cannon already active, cutting a path through the flames. For the first time since the nightmare began, hope flickered in their hearts. But they all knew that between them and that fire engine lay a gauntlet of flame and falling trees. Would the firefighters be able to reach them in time? Would their house, their sanctuary, hold out long enough? Annie pressed her face against the window, her small hand leaving a print on the glass as she watched the approaching lights. "The firefighters are coming to save us," she whispered, her voice full of the pure faith only a child could maintain in such moments, "just like in my bedtime stories." Her parents exchanged glances over her head, hoping desperately that this story, like the ones they read her at night, would have a happy ending. Captain Ana Rodriguez's radio crackled with static before the desperate message cut through. "Mayday, Mayday. Family trapped at 1247 Pine Ridge Road. 2 adults, 3 children. Main road blocked by fallen trees. No alternate escape route. Fire approaching from east and south. The darkness had given way to an apocalyptic dawn, the sky a mix of black smoke and blood-red clouds. Anna stood beside Engine 47, her mind racing as she processed the dispatcher's words. She knew that address. It was deep in the danger zone, right where the fire was burning hottest. "All units fall back to safe zones," came the chief's order through the radio. "Conditions too dangerous for direct engagement. Air support grounded due to high winds." Repeat, "All units fall back immediately." Anna's hand tightened on her radio as she looked at her crew. Tommy Chen was checking their water levels while Lisa Ramirez monitored the wind conditions. Young David Patel stood nearby, his face streaked with soot but his eyes alert and ready. "There's a family up there," Anna said quietly, more to herself than her crew. The wind howled around them, carrying embers that danced like fireflies in the smoky air. The temperature had risen to unbearable levels, and their protective gear could only do so much. "Cap, you heard the order," Tommy said, but his voice held no conviction. He'd worked with Anna long enough to know what was coming. "We're supposed to fall back." Anna closed her eyes for a moment, seeing faces in her mind, not just the family trapped up there, but her own family. Her daughter's school photo on her desk, her husband's goodbye kiss that morning. Opening her eyes, she looked at the specialized firefighting vehicle they called the Beast, their most advanced piece of equipment designed for the worst conditions. "Listen up," she gathered her crew close, her voice firm. "I'm going up there. It's against orders, and I won't ask any of you to risk your careers. I'll take the Beast. The rest of you get Engine 47 to the safe zone." A moment of silence followed, broken only by the roar of the approaching fire and the distant sound of explosions as more homes succumbed to the flames. "With all due respect, Cap," Lisa stepped forward, adjusting her oxygen mask. "You're out of your mind if you think we're letting you go alone." "She's right," David added, his rookie nervousness replaced by determination. "We're a team. Either we all go or none of us go." Tommy was already moving toward the Beast, checking its systems. "Better decide quick, Cap. That family's running out of time." Anna felt a surge of pride even as worry gnawed at her gut. This decision could end all their careers or worse, but as another desperate call came through the radio from the trapped family, she knew there was only one choice she could live with. "Command, this is Engine 47, she radioed, her voice steady. "We're experiencing mechanical issues. Need to delay fallback order." It wasn't exactly a lie. They would have mechanical issues if they pushed the Beast as hard as they'd need to. The response was lost in static, which was probably for the best. Anna climbed into the driver's seat of the Beast, her crew taking their positions. The vehicle's reinforced cabin and advanced fire suppression systems were their only advantage against what lay ahead. "Last chance to back out," she announced, looking at each member of her crew. Their faces reflected the same mix of fear and determination she felt. They all knew what was at stake. "The family has 3 kids," David said quietly. "Just like my sister's family." It was all that needed to be said. Anna engaged the Beast's engine, its powerful motor roaring to life. The vehicle's external cameras showed the hellish landscape they were about to drive into. The main road up to Pine Ridge was barely visible through the smoke, and the heat signatures on their thermal imaging showed walls of flame on both sides. "Lisa, get me the most current wind data," Anna ordered as they began to move. "Tommy, monitor our water levels. We'll need every drop. David, keep trying to reach that family on any frequency you can find." The Beast lurched forward, its specialized tires gripping the ash-covered road. They passed the last safety checkpoint, and Anna could swear she heard the chief's voice on the radio ordering them to stop. But there was no turning back now. A massive fireball erupted to their right as another house was consumed by the inferno. The Beast's external temperature sensors were already maxed out, and they'd barely begun their ascent. Through the smoke, they could see the twisted remains of other vehicles that had tried to escape too late. 2 miles to the target, Lisa reported, her voice tense. Wind shifting to the northwest, pushing the fire right toward them. Anna gripped the wheel tighter, using every bit of her training and experience to navigate through the chaos. The Beast's reinforced windshield was their only protection from the hurricane of embers swirling around them. "Water pressure optimal," Tommy called out. "But we're going to need a miracle to make it stretch." Then it's a good day for miracles, Anna responded, steering around a burning tree that blocked half the road. The beast's thermally insulated cabin was getting warmer by the minute, despite their best technology. David's voice suddenly cut through the tension. Cap, I've got them on the radio. They're still alive, but the fires reached their property line. As they rounded the final bend, they could see the house through the smoke, a two-story structure with flames approaching from multiple directions. A family stood at the windows, waving desperately as the beast's headlights cut through the darkness. Anna took a deep breath, tasting the filtered air through her mask. Everything in her training told her this was suicide. Everything in her heart told her it was the only choice. This is where we earn our pay, she said, shifting the beast into its highest gear. Let's go save that family. The beast rode up the final stretch of road, its powerful engine straining against the steep grade. Captain Ana Rodriguez could barely see 20 feet ahead through the thick smoke, relying heavily on the vehicle's thermal imaging displays. The scene outside was like something from another world, trees exploding into flames, the air itself seeming to burn. Temperature outside hitting 1,400 degrees. Lisa shouted from her monitoring station. The house's roof is starting to smoke. Through the beast's reinforced windows, they could see the Chen family pressed against their living room window. 8-year-old Amy's small hand was clearly visible against the glass, clutching what looked like a stuffed animal. The sight made Anna's heart clench. She had a daughter about the same age. Tommy, start the water cannon, Anna commanded, positioning the beast between the approaching fire and the house. David, prep the fire blankets. Lisa, get ready with the thermal scanner. We need to find the coolest path out of here. The beast's external sprayer system activated, creating a protective barrier of water around the vehicle. It wouldn't last long in this heat, but it might buy them the precious minutes they needed. Mrs. Chen. Anna's voice boomed through the beast's external speaker system. Get your family ready. When we give the signal, you'll need to run to our vehicle. Cover your faces with wet cloth. Inside the house, the family scrambled to follow instructions. Through the thermal imaging, Anna could see them soaking towels in the kitchen sink. Mr. Chen was carrying Emmy, while the teenage twins stayed close to their mother. Fires jumping the creek bed. Tommy warned, adjusting the water cannon to fight back a new surge of flames. We've got maybe 3 minutes before we're completely surrounded. Anna made a quick calculation. The distance from the house's front door to the beast was about 30 feet. In normal conditions, it would be a 5-second run. But with the intense heat and thick smoke, every step would be a challenge. David, take the rear water cannon, Anna ordered, strapping on her protective gear. Lisa, monitor our heat shields. Tommy, you're with me. We're going out there to guide them in. Before anyone could protest, Anna was already opening the beast's specially designed door. The heat hit her like a physical force, even through her protective gear. Tommy was right behind her, both of them crouching behind the spray of the water cannon. Now. Anna signaled through her radio to the house. Come out now. The front door burst open, and the Chen family emerged into hell. Mr. Chen led the way, still carrying Amy, who had her face buried in a wet towel. Mrs. Chen and the twins followed, staying low as they'd been instructed. Halfway to the beast, disaster struck. A massive branch, fully engulfed in flames, crashed down just feet from the family. Mrs. Chen screamed, stumbling backward. One of the twins, Michael, pulled her forward, while Robert helped steady his father, who had nearly fallen while shielding Amy. Keep moving, Tommy shouted, adjusting his position to provide better coverage with his portable water sprayer. Straight ahead. Don't stop. Anna met them halfway, using her own body to shield them from the worst of the heat. She could feel her protective gear approaching its limits, the temperature warnings in her helmet blaring urgently. Inside. Quick, she guided them to the beast's open door. David and Lisa helped pull them in while maintaining the water coverage. Andy was first, still clutching her stuffed giraffe, now slightly singed. The twins scrambled in next, helping their parents climb aboard. Everyone in. Anna did a quick head count as she and Tommy retreated back into the vehicle. The family huddled in the beast's reinforced cabin, coughing but alive. Mrs. Chen was treating a minor burn on Robert's arm with a first aid kit Lisa had provided. Water reserves at 15%. Tommy reported as he sealed the door. "We need to move now." Anna jumped back into the driver's seat, her gloves slightly melted from the rescue. The beast's external cameras showed their situation had deteriorated rapidly. They were now completely surrounded by fire. "Hold on tight," she called out to everyone. "This is going to get rough." The beast lurched forward as Anna engaged its most powerful systems. The vehicle was designed for exactly this scenario, escaping through active fire zones, but it had never been tested in conditions this extreme. "Mom, look." Annie's voice piped up from the back, where she sat secured between her brothers. She pointed at the thermal imaging screen, fascinated despite their dire situation. "The whole world is red. Temperature in the wheel wells reaching critical." Lisa warned, her fingers flying over the control panel, activating emergency cooling systems. The beast pushed through a wall of flames, its reinforced hull groaning under the stress. Through the smoke, Anna could barely make out the road. They were driving essentially blind, relying on GPS and thermal imaging to stay on course. "Fire tornado forming on our left," David called out, his voice tense but controlled. The phenomenon was as terrifying as it sounded, a swirling vortex of flame reaching into the sky. Mr. Chen held his wife's hand tightly as they watched their home disappear into the inferno through the beast's rear cameras. 20 years of memories were being consumed by the flames, but their family was intact, and right now, that was all that mattered. 2 miles to the safety zone, Lisa reported, checking their navigation system. "But the main road is completely blocked by fallen trees." Anna nodded grimly. "Then we make our own road." She turned the beast onto a maintenance track she knew from her years of service. It wasn't meant for a vehicle this size, but they had no choice. The next few minutes were a blur of heat, noise, and desperate maneuvering. The beast crashed through burning underbrush, its reinforced hull deflecting smaller falling branches. The Chen family held onto each other, their faces illuminated by the hellish glow outside. "Look," Tommy pointed ahead. "I can see the emergency lights at the evacuation point." Through the smoke, the flashing lights of multiple emergency vehicles became visible. They had almost made it. But the beast's warning systems were screaming now, their protective systems were failing, and the heat was starting to penetrate the cabin. "One last push," Anna muttered, more to herself than anyone else. She could feel the vehicle's steering getting sluggish as its systems approached their limits. The beast wasn't designed to operate in these conditions for this long. With a final surge of power, they burst through the last wall of flames. The air suddenly cleared, and they could see dozens of firefighters and emergency personnel rushing toward them. They had made it. As the beast finally came to a stop in the safety zone, Anna looked back at the family they just rescued. Emmy had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, her stuffed giraffe still clutched tightly. The twins were quietly comforting their parents, who sat in shocked silence. "Thank you," Mrs. Chen said simply, tears streaking through the suit on her face. "You saved our lives." Anna just nodded. The relative safety of the evacuation zone lasted barely 5 minutes before everything changed again. Captain Ana Rodriguez was helping the Chen family out of the beast when she heard it, a sound like a freight train approaching, but infinitely more terrifying. Fires jumped the containment line. The warning came through every radio channel simultaneously. "Evacuation zone compromised. All units move out immediately." Anna looked at her crew, then at the family they just rescued. The beast, their mighty firefighting vehicle, was running on fumes. Its systems were overheated, warning lights flashing across every display panel. The water tanks were nearly empty, and the protective hull had been pushed well beyond its design limits. "Engines overheating," Tommy called out from where he was checking the beast's vital systems. "Cooling systems failing. We've got maybe 20 minutes before total shutdown." Lisa was already at the navigation console, fingers flying over the controls. "Main roads completely cut off. Secondary routes are reporting total gridlock with evacuating vehicles." The Chen family huddled closer together, their brief moment of relief shattered. 8-year-old Emmy clutched her Sing giraffe tighter, while the twins, Michael and Robert, tried to look brave for their parents' sake. "We can't stay here," Anna decided, her voice firm despite her exhaustion, "and we can't leave them behind." She pointed to where other families were being loaded into emergency vehicles, fear evident on every face. The old logging road, David suggested suddenly. The one that runs along the river. It's rough terrain, but the water might have kept the area clearer of fire. Anna pulled up the map on the beast's main screen. The logging road was barely more than a trail in some places, and it wound dangerously close to steep drop-offs. But David was right. It might be their only option. "Everyone back in," she ordered. "And somebody find me a satellite feed of that route." The family climbed back into the beast, joined by 3 more people from other evacuating vehicles, an elderly man and a young couple who had nowhere else to go. The cabin was cramped now, but nobody complained. They all knew the alternative. As Anna steered the beast onto the logging road, the vehicle's external cameras showed the firestorm they were leaving behind. The evacuation zone they just left was already being consumed by flames, the heat so intense it was melting the asphalt. "Watch that slope," Lisa warned as they navigated a particularly treacherous turn. The beast's wheels sprayed gravel into the abyss below. Inside the cabin, everyone held their breath. Tommy monitored the engine temperature, which was climbing steadily into the red zone. "We need to find water," he reported grimly. "Engine won't last much longer at these temperatures." The old logging road curved alongside a creek that had been reduced to a trickle by the drought. But even that small amount of water created a natural barrier that slowed the fire's advance. The air was thick with smoke, but slightly cooler near the water. Suddenly, a massive burning tree crashed across the road ahead of them. Anna slammed on the brakes, the beast sliding on the loose gravel. Everyone was thrown forward, then back against their seats. "We can't turn around," David said, stating what everyone could see. The road was too narrow, and the fire was already closing in behind them. Anna gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Then we go through it." She engaged the beast's front water cannon, using their precious remaining water supply to douse the burning tree. "Everybody brace yourselves," she called out. The beast's reinforced bumper hit the partially extinguished tree with a tremendous crash. Metal screamed against wood as they pushed through, the vehicle's powerful engine straining with the effort. Inside the cabin, Mrs. Chen was singing softly to Amy, trying to keep her calm. The twins had their arms around their father, who was pale but steady. The elderly man they'd picked up was praying quietly, while the young couple held each other's hands so tight their knuckles were white. Engine temperature critical. Tommy's warning was almost lost in the noise of their struggle with the fallen tree. "We've got 5 minutes, maybe less." Finally, with a last metallic groan, the beast broke through. Burning branches scraped along the sides of the vehicle, adding new scars to its already battered exterior, but their troubles weren't over. The heat had cracked the road surface ahead, creating a series of deep fissures. Anna had to weave between them, each maneuver bringing them dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. "There." Lisa pointed to something on her screen. "The river widens about half a mile ahead. There's a boat launch area, we might find help there." The next few minutes were a blur of desperate driving. The beast's engine was making sounds no engine should make, black smoke pouring from under its hood. The temperature inside the cabin was rising steadily as the cooling systems failed one by one. Amy had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, exhaustion finally overwhelming her fear. The twins were helping Lisa monitor the navigation systems, while their father assisted Tommy in managing the beast's failing systems. "Almost there," Anna kept saying, though each passing second felt like an eternity. The beast's headlights cut through the smoke, revealing glimpses of the river below. They were so close to safety, but the vehicle was dying beneath them. A loud bang from the engine compartment made everyone jump. Steam began pouring from under the hood, and the beast's powerful motor began to stutter. "That's it," Tommy shouted. "Engine's gone. We're running on momentum." Anna aimed the dying vehicle toward the boat launch area they could now see through the smoke. The beast rolled the last few hundred yards on sheer determination, finally coming to a stop just as its engine gave out completely. Through the haze, they could see boats approaching, rescue crews that had been stationed on the river. They had made it. The beast, their faithful machine, had given its last breath to get them to safety. "Look," David said softly, pointing back the way they'd come. Through the beast's rear cameras, they could see their path disappearing into the inferno. The road they just traveled was now completely engulfed in flames. The rescue boats were pulling up to the launch area now, their crews already deploying to help. Anna looked at her team, exhausted, smoke-stained, but alive. She looked at the families they'd saved, seeing the same mixture of relief and disbelief on every face. "Thank you," Mr. Chen said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "We owe you our lives." Anna shook her head. "Just doing our job," she replied, but she couldn't keep the pride out of her voice. They had faced impossible odds and won. The beast might be dead, but its precious cargo, 14 human lives, was safe. 3 weeks after the rescue, Captain Ana Rodriguez stood at the observation deck of the rebuilt fire station, watching the first real rainstorm of the season wash away the last traces of ash from the sky. The massive wildfire had finally been contained, but its impact would be felt for years to come. Down in the station's garage, the beast's charred remains sat like a battle-scarred warrior. The vehicle would never run again, but Chief Thompson had decided to keep it as a reminder of both the fire's fury and the courage it had inspired. Someone had stuck a small note on its cracked windshield that read "Lives Saved, 14." Below that, in a child's handwriting, was a drawing of a giraffe. "Morning, Cap." Tommy's voice carried across the garage as he arrived for his shift. He looked better rested now, though like everyone else, he still carried the memory of that night in his eyes. "Did you see the newspaper?" Anna nodded. The front page showed the devastating scope of the fire. Over 50,000 acres burned, hundreds of homes lost. But there was another story too, one that had captured people's hearts. Firefighters' desperate rescue leads to new safety protocols. The article detailed how their experience had prompted a complete overhaul of wildfire response strategies. The department was now implementing new evacuation procedures, installing emergency underground shelters in remote communities, and upgrading their equipment to handle extreme conditions better. "Chief wants to see you," Lisa called out as she walked in, carrying a stack of papers. "Something about the Chen family." Anna found the chief in his office, looking over blueprints. The walls were covered with maps showing the fire's progression and newly designated safety zones. He looked up as she entered, a rare smile on his weathered face. "The Chen family's insurance company finally processed their claim," he said, pushing a folder across his desk. "But that's not why I called you in." He pulled out a letter, handwritten on colorful paper. This came from young Emmy Chen. She's doing a presentation at her new school about bravery and community service. Wants to know if her firefighter heroes could attend. Anna picked up the letter, recognizing the same handwriting from the beast's windshield. Emmy had drawn another picture, this time of firefighters standing beside what was unmistakably meant to be the beast, water cannons blazing. "There's more," the chief continued. "Remember how Mr. Chen mentioned he was an engineer? Well, he's been working with the department's equipment division. They're developing a new type of firefighting vehicle using lessons learned from what happened to the beast. They're calling it the Phoenix." The sound of engines drew their attention outside. David was leading a training session for new recruits, using the beast's story to teach them about split-second decisions and calculated risks. The younger firefighter had grown more confident since that night, his experience adding weight to his words. "The department review board met yesterday," the chief added, his tone becoming more serious. "About your decision to disobey the fallback order." Anna straightened in her chair. She had been expecting this. That night, she had chosen to follow her heart rather than protocol, risking not only her own career, but those of her crew as well. "They've decided to modify the protocols," he continued, surprising her. "Sometimes the book needs to be rewritten. Your actions prove that. The new guidelines will allow for situational judgment in rescue operations, with proper safeguards in place." Through the window, Anna could see more dark clouds gathering on the horizon. But these were different from the smoke clouds of that terrible night. These promised rain, renewal, and regrowth.